Hey, welcome back to the How to Podcast series. It's Dave with you. My name is Dave. I'll be Dave. You be you. Nice to have you here. I want to talk about something that I'm seeing in podcasting that makes me pause, makes me go, oh boy. And it is when podcasters, some podcasters, not the majority, but some podcasters, fall in love with the sound of their own voice, and their ego gets built to the point where they're on a very slippery slope. So I want to talk to you as a relatively new podcaster. You're just starting, been doing this for a little while, how we as podcasters can battle the one thing that we all have in common, our ego. This thing that's behind us, lurking in the background, that we need a healthy dose of to put ourselves out in the world, to create content. We do have to have some form of an ego, but when our ego takes over, I think we're sliding into a very dangerous place. So today on this episode, I want to talk about the issue of self-absorption in podcast, where we're so self-absorbed with who we are as the podcast host. And that is becoming a more significant concern in podcasting, potentially to the point where it stifles content creation and our attempts at building community, because the podcast that we do is really more about us than anyone else. And we show up to the mic to talk about our wisdom, our knowledge, who we are, and we promote ourselves so much that we tend to push people away. I see it in social media. I hear it on podcasts. I see award shows that favor the few and ignore the majority. And I hear people bragging about all of their goals and all of the things they've accomplished in podcasting. And I feel like they are creating distance between themselves and their audience, where no one's going to catch them. No one's going to be as good as they are. And it makes me feel a little sad that we're getting to that point where gurus and people that have been in the space forever now hold it over us as newcomers to podcasting, that they own it and we're just renters in the space. So I want to talk a little bit about, don't fall in love with yourself, fall in love with your audience. Here on the podcast today. It's not meant to be judgmental. I just want to shine a light on something that I'm seeing in podcasting that I think we need to be aware of, and we need to check ourselves, me included, so that we're on the right path as a podcaster. So from this episode, take what you want, leave what you don't, skip it, stick around. It's really up to you. But I just want to have a little conversation today, you and I, about ego in podcasting. How much is good enough? How much is allowed? When should we have a little warning light go off saying, hang on, and what do we do with our ego as a podcaster? You're on the How to Podcast series. I'm glad you're still here. Let's go. I think when we fall in love with the sound of our own voice, at the beginning, when we first start podcasting, we hate the sound of our voice. We're like, oh, that's what I sound like? It's a common thing that many, many podcasters feel, as they're like, that's what I sound like. But then there comes a point when that changes. And that's what I want to talk about today. We've gone from hating the sound of our voice to falling in love with the sound of our voice. We treat our podcast like it's our own personal time where we can become a better person, because we're just going to put ourselves out there, and our audience turns into our psychiatrist. And we just vent and we share and we tell our stories. And I just, it's interesting when I hear some podcasters who have gone down a path where they believe that every word out of their mouth is just amazing. And it not always is. So I see that self-absorption as a human trait can really negatively affect and impact your podcast by narrowing the focus of your show from being a show focused on the audience to being a show focused on you as the host, where you're the center of attention. And I think we lose focus on our listeners. And really, that's when we start losing audience members, is when people come episode to episode and all we do is talk about ourselves. All we do is talk about who we are and how great we are and all of these things. And we seem to push people away. When podcasters become overly focused on themselves, they might lose sight of their audience, really. And the needs of their audience, the interests of their audience. This can lead to content that fails to resonate with listeners over time. I think as well, when we get self-absorbed as podcasters, we start to lack empathy for our audience. When we're self-absorbed as content creators, we often struggle to connect with our audience. And we stay surface level. We never go deep with them. This lack of empathy can actually result in content that feels disconnected and it's not authentic at all. As well, we seem to become more inwardly focused. We stop collaborating with people. We stop bringing other voices in because we want our voice to be the loudest. We want to be the center of attention, and we want to be the voice. I've heard people say that they started podcasting because they wanted to be the single voice in podcasting about podcasting. And that seems very elitist, seems very gatekeeper-ish. There are many great voices in the space of podcasts about podcasting. There are many great podcasts that feature authors. There are many great business podcasts and true crime podcasts. So to claim that you want to be the single best voice in any of these categories seems so very self-focused and very exclusionary. Like you just don't want anyone else in the space to compete with. When there's a lot of great opinions and voices, and the beautiful thing about podcasting is collaborating with others. So as we get so self-absorbed in who we are, we tend to lack collaboration. An inflated ego can make podcasters less likely to collaborate with you. And that's what I've found. I've had podcasters who podcast about podcasting reach out to me, but when I listen to their show, I don't feel like it's a good fit because they're so into themselves that even if I came on to collaborate with them, they would want to make even our episode together about them, not about us. I think it really limits our diversity. And what I've always talked about on the show is I think we need more voices in podcasting, not less. I think we need more people from different backgrounds and different places in the world and different life stories in podcasting and not less. I don't think I would ever want to be the single voice of podcasting. It's a lot to carry on your shoulders, and I only know what I know, and I don't know what I don't know. So in that, I find it better to collaborate with you, and our combined voices in a group, in a community, is way stronger than any single voice in podcasting. So that's why I'm butting up against this a little bit, is I don't feel comfortable that anyone should put themselves over top of anyone else in this space. And I want to encourage you as a potential podcaster or a new podcaster that your voice is just as welcome and just as needed as anyone who's been here since day one. You could be here for 5 minutes and your voice matters just as much as the person who's been here for 20 years because you can reach an audience that other person can't. So without you, podcasting isn't going to grow. So the more people coming into podcasting, the better. And I think all of us need to recognize that collaboration needs to be valued, not downplayed and not reduced because our ego and being self-absorbed blocks out the sun reflecting on others and we become the source of everything. I think we got to be careful. There's a disturbing shift happening that I see in podcasting where podcasters are moving away from building community into more of a self-promotional space. The podcasting landscape has seen a noticeable shift towards promoting oneself and their course and their program and their book and their thing, and less about building a community around a topic. There's a real strong focus on vanity metrics, which is, followers, listeners, downloads, all of those things, people on your newsletter. There's just this vanity metric, which puffs up your ego, which then gives you a false sense of making progress. But at the same time, you're just collecting likes and follows and hearts, and you're just collecting metrics. I don't understand. You're not actually having a conversation with anybody. You're showing up to the mic and doing a monologue, and anytime somebody reaches out to you, you seem annoyed or disconnected or whatever. But these are the people who actually support you and listen to your show. I just don't understand how we've gotten so far away from the idea that a podcast is meant to bring people together, not separate us into groups. Podcasters just seem to be so fixated on their download numbers and their rankings and their awards, often at the expense of creating meaningful content that fosters genuine connections with the audience that are listening to the show. And the other part that really seems to bother me in podcasting right now, maybe not you so much, maybe yet, but maybe you're unaware of it, is just the uneven recognition in podcasting. The podcast industry tends to celebrate a very small percentage of highly successful shows, and this can actually lead to frustration and demotivates the vast majority of us who are a team of one, who do our own show and don't have producers and editors and people who do all the work behind the scenes. We do all of this, the preparation and recording ourselves. Some of us do our own editing, whatever, but we don't have like a team of 20, and we don't have a budget for every episode. We are doing this all ourselves on our own dime and with very little assistance from an outside source. The people who get celebrated the most are the ones with a huge team and thousands of dollars per episode set aside in budgets, and they're a part of big networks, and they get all the fancy ads, and they speak as if they are the majority, but they are a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the total number of podcasters out there. And we as solo podcasters who do this ourselves and have no other people with us, we feel like we are dwarfed and in the shadow of these monster shows. And I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's fair to make us feel like we're second-class podcasters because we're not at a level to gain notoriety and to gain the attention of people who are quote-unquote influencers in podcasting. There's a very interesting impact of inflated egos in podcasting. I think that inflated egos have affected the podcast ecosystem, and it's happened in several ways. The first is unrealistic expectations. I talk to a lot of new podcasters who come to podcasting expecting the results that are shown to them by the big names in podcasting. Many new podcasters enter the field with these inflated expectations of overnight success and immediate audience and immediate finances and making money from their show. And this can lead to disappointment and potentially even abandoning their shows altogether and giving up on podcasting too early. There's also an impact through inflated egos on quality versus quantity. The drive for recognition can push some podcasters to prioritize quantity over quality, resulting in a flood of content that may or may not add significant value to listeners. If I just podcast a lot, that's all it's going to take to grow. And it doesn't matter what I say or what my podcast is about. I just have to do it a lot. This whole quantity and quality balance, I think we need to take a look at that in podcasting. The other thing that inflated egos has as impact on podcasting is the neglect for a niche audience. Again, our friends in the US niche audience. The focus on achieving broad appeal can lead many podcasters to neglect smaller, dedicated, engaged, niche audiences that would benefit most from the content. And I actually see people pushing away from the idea that you need to niche down your podcast and niche down your audience. And I see podcasters in the space telling you to do the opposite now. And I'm nervous about that. So let's address the issue. To combat these challenges that we've already talked about, I think podcasters need to consider refocusing on the needs of the audience first. To prioritize creating content that genuinely serves and engages the audience rather than self-promotion. Again, you come to the mic, is it all about you? When we press play on your episode, do we hear about all your awards and all your achievements, or do we hear about your community? Your community can't be an afterthought. Your community needs to be your focus. There's a whole thing that's pretty popular where the saying is the last will be first and the first will be last. And I think that's kind of what we need to think about in podcasting, is all those podcasters that put themselves first, they're going to end up last. And all the podcasters that put the people who are last, unquote, first are going to become the winners. We also need to build authentic connections. This is going to help us to address inflated egos in podcasting. Authentic connections, like real human connections. The saddest thing about social media, there's not a lot of social stuff happening in social media. It's mostly media. That's all it is. It's media and marketing. We need to build authentic connections. I'm trying to do that through our meetups on Saturdays, to give a space for you to come and meet other podcasters and feel encouraged, feel built up, feel strengthened to start a show, continue with your show, to not give up on your show. Come and meet other podcasters, just like you, in a safe place where you're not judged. Authentic connections is the key to battling ego in podcasting. Real relationships with listeners through a genuine interaction and a community that's building each other up. We need more authentic connections. So if you're teetering on, is this podcast about me or my community? And you feel, or you've gotten feedback that, you're too self-focused in your show. All I hear about is you and how great you are. And again, how many awards you've won and all that stuff. I think we need to embrace collaboration, and we need to reach out to other people and not think that we are the only voice in our category. There are more people who know more than you do, who maybe are just not as loud as you are, or have the biggest marketing budget than you have, or the reach that you have, but they have great ideas, great insight that could really help the community grow. But your ego is not allowing anyone close to you to speak about or talk about the things that you talk about because you want to be the voice of that topic. And in that moment, I think you're distancing yourself from great collaboration opportunities with people who could make life better for everyone, including you. We need to redefine what success really is in podcasting. To look beyond the traditional metrics that people wave at us, that our hosting site shows us when we log in, how many listens you got, all that stuff. These metrics and these podcast awards, they seem to measure success based on focusing on a person rather than a community. I don't see a lot of podcast awards around the podcaster with the best community, or the podcaster with the most speak pipe messages, or the most interaction with an audience, or the podcaster who changed a single life with one episode. I don't see a lot of that. we need to redefine what success is in podcasting, and you need to have your own definition of what success is. What does it mean to you? Because I can tell you that my version of success does not match well with a self-inflated ego podcaster who's out there just to promote themselves. My success levels are different. I think the other thing that we're at issue with is ego being a single voice and being the voice in a certain category does not create a room for diversity. As we recognize and appreciate the diverse landscape that we're surrounded by right now, we have people trying to shut people down because they don't sound like, act like, talk like, believe like, come from the same place as. And we're shutting each other down in this global environment. We are better together than in separate groups with separate labels because we can learn from each other. And a conversation is better than a protest because a conversation has the opportunity for back and forth and some understanding and recognition of the value of someone else's opinion that we don't hold. In that moment, we get to learn more about ourselves and our world by celebrating how diverse it is around us. So anybody that sets themselves up as the voice of fill in the blank, and they want to be the only voice of fill in the blank, we're cutting off any attempts at diversity. And the last thing we need is a single voice in the world about anything. We need more voices, not a single voice. That's what this show's about. That's why I do this podcast. I'm battling against gurus in podcasting who say that they are the voice in podcasting. And you should just basically shut up and listen to them because they know what they're talking about and you don't. Because you don't have the right microphone, you don't have the right hosting site, you don't have the right website or tool or whatever. And you're not allowed to be here because you don't fit their mold. They're the voice of podcasting. That's what they want to be. And their opinion is more important than yours. So in that moment, I'm fighting against that by doing this show. I hope that every episode you hear from myself, my Daily Daves, my guest co-host episodes, that you hear that there are more people in podcasting than Dave. There are more people than me. And my opinion is my opinion. I'm going to share it the best way I can. I'm going to be as open and inclusive as I can with the limited knowledge I have as a 50-some-year-old white guy. I want to be the place where you feel welcome on this show to share your thoughts, to grow, to explore podcasting. Because like I've said many times, there's only one you. And we need you and your voice in podcasting. I can't reach your audience. They won't show up for me. They will show up for you because you are like them. They identify with you and you are their voice. And we need more of you in podcasting. So when you listen to these shows, if you hear somebody come on and they're just all about themselves, the intro's about them, the outro's about them, the content's about them, it's all me, me, me. I'm asking you in this moment, is this serving you? Are you being built up? Are you being encouraged? If you are, great, then stick with it. But if you're not, if you feel like you're not the focus of a podcast as a listener, it might be time to look for a new podcast. It might be time to look for someone who inspires you and encourages you to be better. Don't settle for a podcaster who tears you down, makes fun of you, embarrasses you, somebody you would never bring to a party with your family because you're always afraid of what they might say. Instead, find somebody who builds you up in podcasting, especially for you that's thinking about starting a show. You need to find the right person who brings you forward, who makes you better, who doesn't tear you down, and is not so self-absorbed that they don't even care if you're in the room or not. Self-promotion and recognition have their place in podcasting. Like I said at the beginning, we all need just a little bit of ego to turn on a microphone and share our thoughts with the world. It does require some ego to do this. But what's the difference between healthy ego and unhealthy ego? I think it's just a level of degrees. An overemphasis on the aspects of self-promotion can indeed stifle your creativity as a podcaster, can destroy any attempts at building community around your show. By refocusing on our audience instead of ourselves, I think it's going to help us to foster better, genuine connections and embrace this collaboration that we talked about here on the show today. And podcasters can create more meaningful and impactful content while building a more sustainable and engaged community around their shows. I would love for you to take, if your podcast is a mirror where all you see is yourself, I would love for you to take that mirror down and instead put a window so that you can see the world outside of where you are. And focus more on a window than a mirror. Because a mirror is only going to tell you what you can see in the moment, but a window has no limitations. You can see things in different directions and things change. So focus on a window instead of a mirror for your show. Grow your podcast. And if you're struggling with your ego in podcasting and you're like, Dave, I just need an ego check. I just need an opinion. Have I gone too far? Do I need to change something? I'd gladly listen to your show, give you some feedback, help you out, and just be a listening ear in a non-judgmental space. There's a link in the show notes. Reach out to me. I'd love to chat. Or come join our meetups on Saturdays and meet other podcasters. Be your own guide. Be your own measurement stick and see how far you've gone with your ego. Are you self-absorbed or are you community-absorbed? Is your ego healthy or is it hurting you? And if you have any questions, I'd love to help you over at howtopodcast.ca. It's time to take the mirror down, and it's time to look out the window. Let's focus on the people who listen more than we focus on ourselves. Okay? If you need help, let me know. Thanks for listening. So you're a podcaster, and you podcast alone. You are in your home, you're in your studio, you're in your closet, and you podcast. And you put everything out there in the world, and you're thinking, man, I'd love to meet another podcaster and not feel so alone. I wish there was a way to meet up with other podcasters and talk about my journey, ask my questions in a safe place where others there are also podcasters at different levels. Some people have been doing this a long time. Maybe some podcasters are brand new like me. And I'd love to be able to ask questions and do community with others. Maybe find a guest for my show or be a guest and ask a question that's bothering me about podcasting that I haven't seen or heard or got an answer to. I wish there was a group for me. Dave, do you know of a group where they do all of that and they do group hugs, virtual group hugs? Yeah, we do. It's our meetup. And you know, guess what? You're invited to come to our meetups. They are amazing. Not because of me by any stretch of imagination. It's because they're great because of the people who show up. You're going to meet some of the nicest podcasters you've ever met. There's no judgment. There's no talking down to you. It's not about me. It's about the group. And there's many times where I don't even have to talk. Each of the people coming bring great expertise and insights that can help you grow your show, to help you be a better person. And they're there to support you. It's our meetups, and you can find them at their howtopodcast.ca website. Come join us. There's over 200 people in our group, and we'd love to have you there. Lots of room for you. Come be a part of our meetups and meet other podcasters. Don't do it alone. Podcasting should never be done alone. Come join us. howtopodcast.ca. See you at our meetups.